for magic. We come to this podcast to laugh, to cry, to care, because we need that. All of us. That indescribable feeling we get when the lights begin to dim and we go somewhere we've never been before. Not just entertained, but somehow reborn together. Dazzling cards on a very big playmat, plays that I can feel. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this. Our heroes feel like the best parts of us, and stories feel perfect and powerful because here they are.
And don't forget to turn off your phones while you listen to the podcast.
Yeah. Put your phones on vibrate, please, at the very least.
Turns out Nicole Kidman was just talking about Magic the Gathering the whole time in that
Yes.
AMC Theaters commercial, and we didn't realize it. This is
Yeah.
Nicole Kidman's world, and we're just living in it.
It really is. And to the folks who are like, why are you talking about Nicole Kidman? I was telling EK that every time I wear flannel, like any kind of flannel, I feel like Nicole Kidman in the 90s in any movie she's ever been in. Very like, timeless. I don't know.
Think about it this way. The first, like, seventh word of that speech is the word magic.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's Magic the Gathering, not movie magic.
No, it's not movie magic. She wasn't talking about AMC theaters, which we are not sponsored by yet.
I did have stock in them for a little bit, like most other millennials. But like unironically, Nicole Kidman has good advice for magic in this speech, and
Yeah.
it's very fair, and she is very cognizant of etiquette,
Mhm.
clearly, because heartbreak feels good in a place like this. You know, you're
Yeah.
gonna lose most of your games of Commander, so
Mhm.
like, should learn to feel good getting heartbroken at a game of Commander.
Exactly. This is the Nicole Kidman episode. The plays that hurt the most are the most memorable. And so heartbreak feels good when you're at a table with friends. That's the gathering part of Magic the Gathering. This is the Nicole Kidman episode.
But like, actually though, this is the etiquette episode.
Mhm.
This is something that doesn't get talked about very often, because a lot of Commander etiquette is very like malleable and like unwritten in that sense. So because it's
Mhm.
unwritten, people just don't talk about it. So like,
Yeah.
even if you're like a new Commander player coming over from like another format, like, it's the social contract of Commander is just inherently different than a 60 card format, or even limited. It's just like, things are different, but the same, but
Mm.
different at the same
Yeah.
time. So we thought it'd be interesting to talk about stuff like that, because it's just it's a good thing for newer players to hear, and it's a good thing for more experienced and enfranchised players to be
Mhm.
reminded of.
Yeah.
Finding the reason that we're here to laugh and cry and to care.
And have these stories feel perfect and powerful. you know, regular stuff, normal stuff.
Yeah, right. We made a little list. Like, we actually did notes for
Mhm.
once
Yeah, we did.
of
We're
of
proud of
of,
us.
of some things to talk about. So Chase, you wanna like dive into things and like
Yeah.
talk about the first thing that you wrote down?
So, this episode was originally inspired actually by a tweet that we saw by a friend of ours, Kess, who is 10 out of 10 beautiful person. And
Can
that tweet
confirm.
can confirm, and that tweet pretty much talks about, the sort of the etiquette of Commander and win cons and kind of hidden information and the concept of hidden information. Um, and where that kind of stops and where that kind of starts, especially in a format like Commander, which I think is very interesting because Commanders is very different from literally every other format in the fact that secrecy really doesn't play a part in things like it does in, say, like Modern or Pioneer or Standard or the like. The information is hidden, but like
Yeah,
it's
it's not like a very defined meta where, like, if I'm sitting across the table from a Jeskai Breach deck in Modern, I
Mhm.
know their exact 75 to a T.
Yeah.
Commander's not like that, and like, Commander doesn't have an open deck list sort of thing.
Hmm.
The information that your opponent knows is the information that you give them or provide them in the pregame discussion.
Yes, which is
That being
important.
said, like, yeah, being transparent in the pregame discussion is, I think, is of the utmost importance, especially if you're playing one of those polarizing commanders or one of those commanders where you immediately have to say like, "Oh no, it's not that Kenrith deck. Oh
Mhm.
no, it's not
Yes.
that Najila deck." Like,
Mhm.
you have some splaining to do, like
Yeah.
right off the bat, and like have every reason to need to be transparent and like like even just understanding like, like I don't. If your opponent says like, like I don't really feel like playing against Kenrith today. Do you have a
Mhm.
different deck? Being okay with hearing something like that is
Mhm.
something to be cognizant of, with these different decks.
Yeah. I have a very good example here. I was at my LGS God, like a month ago, and I was playing with my friends during FNM. And I was playing my Cedrus the Traitor King deck, and I didn't do a very good job of explaining it as to what the deck entails. I just was like, "I'm playing Cedrus." And, we went in, we sat and we played, and I got hard targeted, really hard targeted. I got out around turn 4. I was, like, pretty much shut out of the game pretty early on, and I was, like, really bummed about it. And then my friend looked through my deck list because he was like, "I wanna see your Cedrus deck." And then he was like, "Oh, this is not the typical Cedrus deck." He was like, "I expected you were gonna start, like, pitching, Eldrazi to the graveyard and then unearthing Eldrazi." And I'm like, "No, this is a treasures deck." Like, this deck functions off of, like, playing a dockside and then sacking it to a Ruthless Technomancer and then unearthing the dockside again and, like, stuff like that, but he didn't know that. So, that kind of information is very important because it shapes how the game is played. And I was definitely hard targeted, which in itself is something that I feel really weird about because it doesn't make me feel good as a player to be hard targeted. But
No, and
yeah.
I would say like part of a pregame discussion is like putting your opponents at ease so they don't feel obligated to hard target you out of the gate.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like the last thing that anyone wants is a mismatch where just from the get-go it's arch enemy. I
Mhm.
mean, some people find that fun. Personally, I don't, and most people I know don't.
Yeah.
But knowing what information to give your opponents about your deck is like definitely a huge learning experience.
Yes.
And I would say like etiquette wise, it's always beneficial to like lean on a side of caution, like overshare or over explain.
Yeah.
You can always work it back the next time that you play.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
just finding that like happy medium. My Nagila deck, it's an Nagila deck, so people are immediately going to be on edge. But I fan out the whole deck in front of them. I hand it to them. It's like this is what I'm playing. If you want me to play something else, cool.
Mhm.
Like I'm unironically trying to win with Sun Quan, Lord of Wu, and like giving my opponents extra combat steps so that they kill each other while they're goaded. Like,
Mhm.
that's not the CEDH Nijila deck, which people just immediately think of.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure CDH Nijila is not playing Pramicon Sky Rampart
I don't think it is
and
either.
like turning the table into a toilet bowl for combat. Like
Mm.
it's not happening.
Yeah.
But my opponents wouldn't know that if I didn't explain that. You know?
Exactly. And having that information is very important. And also we if something I feel like we should talk about too is like concept of concealing information and that thing
Oh yeah.
too, because again, Magic is again, a game where you want to win, and winning game involves strategy. But at the same time, when you're in a social format like Commander, and winning is as just important as the enjoyment of your opponents and your friends that you're playing with. um Concealing information is something that I've seen talked about a lot, especially on Twitter.
Dude, if I had a nickel for every time I heard someone say, I didn't want to tell them I had this card because I wanted them to be surprised,
Mhm.
I would weirdly have a lot of nickels. And that's
Yeah.
not something I expected to have a lot of nickels for.
Yeah.
Like
And
personally,
I
I don't think that's cool.
For me, it's interesting because I've seen some people where I've said, like one of the things that I love to do when I have that pregame discussion is I like to pose questions, and I believe it was Rachel who kind of like was like, these are questions I ask, and I kind of adopted them because I really like these questions. Rachel Weeks, the questions are off the top of my head. It's like, like what fast mana do you have? How many tutors do you have? Are there any infinite combos do you have? What's the main vibe of your deck, kind of stuff like that. I think those are important questions that reveal information about your deck, but don't like spoil the fun or the surprise of it.
Mhm.
But I've seen people online be like, well, how much information am I supposed to give without ruining the whole entire, surprise of the deck? Because like sometimes the deck is an experience. It's something that you play with. It's a fun thing, and sometimes there are decks where there is a surprise. Um, and so there's two sides of the coin there that I see definitely, and I understand, but like, completely concealing information just feels very unfun. Like I've played against decks where they don't tell me they run a Drannith Magistrate, and then they play Drannith Magistrate turn like 2 or 3, and I'm like, "Well, I can't play now."
Yeah.
And it hurts to have that happen. And I would not have played against you had I known that that is like the main focus of your decks is like hard stacks. I wouldn't have done it, but
There's a time and a place for sandpaper on a table like that. All you had to do in a pregame discussion, like if you're playing stuff like Drannith Magistrate and like Trinisphere and stuff like that, and just say like, I have some stacks pieces and hate bears.
yeah,
That's
that
all.
lets
That's
me
all you
know.
have to say.
Yeah.
That's all you have to say.
Um,
You don't have to
and I
give the laundry list.
yeah.
You have to for anything like this. You don't have to give the laundry list, really.
Mhm.
Just
And I feel like this also ties into like misleading about the board state too. How there'll be people where like I was literally just playing a stream tonight where we had my lovely friend Andrew Schmandrot played Strip Mine, and they were asking, are there any lands that I should be scared of on the board? And I could have been like, I was playing my Chandra deck. No, I was playing Cadric. I was playing Cadric. And I have a Karn's Bastion in there, and that was the only scary land on the board at the time. But like I could have been like, no, no, I don't. But like, why would I hide that information? That's public information on the
yeah.
board.
If you
It's
were like if
visible.
you were sitting in person, they would have an easier time seeing the lands in
Ex
your land base and everything like
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Or like concealing things of like who is the problem. Like there have been times where people in a game of Commander, I bet, whether you play on stream or you play with friends at your LGS, where somebody goes, okay, who should I be scared of? Who's the threat? And like not being public about that, I feel like also ties into that as well.
I think holding yourself accountable for being the threat is also very equitable and just personally I think it's the right thing to do. Like I want a good game, and a good game means that I'm just not gonna run away with things and play solitaire. Like if I wanted to
Mhm.
play solitaire, I'd go do something else. Like
Mhm.
blow up my Bolas Citadel, blow up my Grand Melee or what have you. Like,
Mhm.
you know, if you see something scary, don't be afraid to blow it up because chances are it is actually scary and the reason why someone is the threat at the table.
Yeah. There are moments where like I definitely know that I'm a threat, and like yeah, if I'm honest about it, my thing will be targeted and it will be removed. And that is a feeling that does it sucks. Like it doesn't feel good. You want to do the thing. It's exciting to
Hmm.
do the thing. But like to have that taken away from you, obviously it makes you feel a little deflated in the game. But like at the same time, like being dishonest really does hurt, because people can play with anybody, but they're not obligated to play with you. And if you hide that information, that's the social aspect of the format. I don't want to play with someone who conceals information that is public or lies, because there's a difference between like, oh, I'll make a deal with you versus like outright, you know not being honest. And like obviously there is strategy to it, but like you can politic it in a way, or like go like, well, I mean, if you destroy the thing, I might smack you for 15 on my turn, or I mean,
Yeah.
I might have something in my hand that take cares of it, which is different than just being like, it's not scary. There's a difference between those two things. One involves strategy and the other one just feels bad.
If there's one thing that I like more than doing the thing, it's doing the thing and feeling like I earned it.
Because it
You know,
feels sweet when you do
it
it.
feel it feels satisfying, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it does feel heartbreaking when it doesn't work out. But at the same
Mhm.
time, cool, you got me. Yeah, you know,
I mean that ties back to the tweet that I think that was what, episode 1? That one tweet where like, like, "Don't scoop if like
yeah.
your thing is gone, work for it." Because it's so exciting to get that climb back up to victory in the weirdest of ways, and sometimes it's doable and sometimes it's not, and that's okay.
It's interesting you bring up scooping because like scooping as like creators, it's just not something that we do.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Normally there's like this etiquette thing in Commander that I've noticed. It's just like you scoop at
Mhm.
sorcery speed, but
Yes, 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 yes,
you
yes.
scoop as a collective.
Mhm.
You don't just have like one person bow out and say like, yeah, I'm done. Like that. I never see it. I've
I've
never seen it ever, and I'm pretty sure I never will.
Yeah.
And like that's one of those unwritten rules of Commander. Like, A, scoop at sorcery speed, but B, you scoop as a table.
I've only rescooped once. Um, once, and that was at my LGS. It was like 2 years ago. And I feel like this also ties into etiquette, so it's a good story. Nicole Kidman
Ooh,
would be proud. But she's a weaver of
WWNKD.
tales. Yeah, what would Nicole Kidman do? She's a weaver of tales, a mistress of wonder. But I was playing at my LGS, and I was play testing a deck, and it was very, very, very weak. Like, this was before I was doing consistent deck building streams where I had dozens of people behind me, kind of going, "Hey, no, yes, no, yes." So I was a very baby deck, and I wanted to play test it. And I was playtesting with an acquaintance and a stranger. And we had the rule zero conversation. And I said, "Hey, I'm playtesting. This deck is very weak. It is not strong. It does not have whatever combos. It does not do turn blah blah whatever." And one of my opponents was like, "Cool, that sounds great. I'll do that. That sounds cool." And my other opponent was like, "I don't care what you're playing. I'm gonna play this. I'm gonna play my CDH list." And I was just like, "Oh, okay, you know what it is." But he knows I'm playtesting, so it's fine. And then we played, and he hard comboed me out really early, like turn two, turn three, and I was like, "I don't like this." And like two more turns
Heartbreak did
passed,
not
and I'm
feel
like,
good in that place.
it did not feel good in that place, and I scooped. And then he won the game like 2 turns later and beat our third opponent, and he asked me if I wanted to play another game. And I said, "I don't wanna play another game with you
Yeah.
because, I feel like you ignored that conversation that we had." And, like, in hindsight, I probably should have not played with him because he said, "I don't care what you're gonna play, I'm gonna play my CDH." And I was like, "Okay, if you say I don't care, then I probably should remove myself from the
That's a red
situation."
flag. That's a red
Yeah,
flag.
but, like, and it's not even like, "Oh, he played high powered." It was that he went, "I don't even care what you're playing. I'm gonna do this." And that is
Mhm.
where an etiquette thing, and I should have removed myself from the situation, but, like, it was, like, 2 years ago, Chase, so I was, like, nervous about what people thought of me. I don't care anymore. So,
Proud of you.
like,
That's
yeah,
called
thank you.
growth.
It's called growth, baby, and yeah. Situations like that, you are allowed to say no, and I even posted, like, a little tweet thread about that, like, we Commander is the only format where you have the privilege to, like, remove yourself from a situation. You're
Mhm.
not tied to a table like you would be if you were in, like, an actual tournament. And, CDH tournaments, those are also a thing, so I would say probably not for CDH tournaments, but, like.
Making your opponent feel uncomfortable, like there's that's part of the infraction procedure guide though.
Mhm,
Like just being unsportsmanlike, not being
mhm,
conscientious of your opponent in, the time and space. There is procedure for dealing with competitors who are
mhm.
not cognizant and conscientious of their opponents.
Yeah,
Uh, it's a little bit harder to enforce in a more casual setting,
yeah,
obviously, which is why I personally think that the most important thing at a commander table is being cognizant of consent. Um,
yes, yes.
you're there for like 2 hours, and your time is valuable. Like
Mhm,
you want to make sure that everyone is on as best a page as possible and consenting to power level, or like, I don't really feel like playing against Stasis and Armageddon today. Like
mhm,
the rule zero discussion is less about enabling certain things so that people are just like, oh, just like, rule zero commander, like rule zero
mhm.
Akon's run into my 99, stuff like that. It's like
Yeah,
it's not really the intent.
mhm.
The intent is to be a vehicle of consent, essentially.
Yeah,
Yes, playing, sort of Dungeons and Dragons and like other silver border cards is part of that consent, but it's definitely
mhm.
not the main the main reason for it.
Yeah. And I it's about setting expectations for what's
Hmm.
gonna happen in the game, and
100%.
that's in general. And actually something that it's from what I remember, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I'm bringing this up right now randomly and have not fact checked this, but your favorite thing. But I believe on the RC website it's called like the social contract.
It
And
is.
I actually feel like, if I'm being honest, I would really like a communal nomenclature change on that, and calling it, the social contract over Rule Zero conversation. Because I think we as a community have kind of turned Rule Zero into the expectation of, I'm playing proxies, I'm playing silver border cards, I'm playing acorn cards, I'm playing this non-legendary creature as my commander. And I think we've kind of turned it into only that, when it should be
Yeah.
about that social aspect, and
Hmm.
that's the most important part of the game.
Well, especially considering like the reason why it's even called the social contract in the first place is social contract goes beyond commander, goes beyond everything. Like that's like actually just like a sociological phenomena
Mhm,
in
mhm,
general inside of game theory. Uh,
mhm,
so it makes sense that it's called that. The social contract is the unwritten way of saying we're having a rule zero discussion, or we're having a
mhm,
pregame discussion. That's essentially what you're doing. It's just people have reworded it, and like you said, they've warped the meaning of it over time. I've had sour interactions with rule zero conversations, pregame
mhm,
conversations, stuff like that. Where it's like, hey, I'm playing silver border cards in my deck. It's like,
mhm.
but they don't say what silver border cards. There's some
Yeah.
absolutely heinous silver border cards that fundamentally
Mhm.
break the game.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing, there's a big difference between playing like Grand Calculatron and like, I don't know, A Cornelia or something like that. Like
Yeah.
huge,
There's a huge
huge
difference.
difference.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that like go. I want to know.
Mhm.
If I'm gonna spend 90 minutes to 2 hours, I kind of want to know what I'm getting myself into.
Mhm.
And like
And
I know you mentioned like proxies and stuff like that, and
mhm.
that whole category of discussion basically just comes down to what are you comfortable with.
Mhm.
Um,
That's important.
you don't have to be comfortable with everything. If
Mhm.
someone says like, "Hey, I kind of want to do this," you have the right to say no. Like
Yeah.
that's on you. You don't have to feel coerced. You don't have to feel obligated
Mhm.
to indulge somebody.
Yeah.
99% of the time it's going to be done with, good intent, but
Mhm.
you still want to protect yourself for that 1% of, 1% of time
Mhm.
where it's not done with good intent.
And I understand, like, the big proxy debate is definitely, like, a very touchy subject with, people in the community, and I
It's like,
1000%
well, we're
get
not
that.
even going to get into it much, but
Yeah.
it's like
But
tangentially related here.
yeah, the concept of, like, the etiquette thing, whether you're playing, like, quote, unquote, "illegal cards," so, like, gold bordered cards, or, like, silver bordered cards, or acorn cards.
I mean, like
You
my
know
time twister in my Najila deck is an artist proof on the back of a Lavinia. Like
Yeah. It's
that's
technically not a real time twister.
yeah, technically it should be more of a Lavinia, but it's like it's a time twister. Like it's
I mean,
I would bring that up like I would bring up a proxy. If someone's not cool with playing it,
mhm,
I have a backup to switch it out. And like that's something to keep in mind too. Like, if you have like a proxy or two in your deck, have
mhm,
have a swap or two. That's easy enough.
yeah.
Even if it's just like two basic lands, like bumping your land count from 37 to 39. You're
Mhm,
unless it's like a win, like the actual win con of the deck, you're not going
mhm.
to notice a difference.
I,
Realistically, it's not going to make a difference.
I was, playing at my LGS, so many LGS, stories from me today. Uh, you know,
That's good though.
Nicole Kidman. Storyteller, weaver of tales. But, there was a time where I was playing at my LGS, and I actually had built a silver bordered deck with the Surgeon General Commander, and it was all mutate, which I think is a pretty fair mechanic. Not mutate, augment. It was augment. It was like pretty, because there was
Yeah,
no
well,
black bordered
big
stuff in it.
difference between the two.
Yeah, big difference. It was augment, but it was all silver border. There was no black bordered shenanigans, and I chose cards that were only fair, so I didn't do anything with contraptions or anything like that. It was just only augment. And I asked a friend of mine at my old LGS if I could play it, and he said, "No, I don't really wanna play against that." And I was like, "Oh, why?" And he said, "Well, I really like to stick with, the rules as laid out by the Commander Rules Committee." And I was like, "You know what? That's really fair. Their rules are set in place, and if you don't wanna do it, you don't have to." So I just put it down and I chose another deck. And I think that's important to understand, like, I don't think anybody does anything maliciously when it comes to that, and I mean, there are gonna be some people who might do it maliciously for sure, because there's always gonna be
You
the
can
group of.
kind of tell though, just
Mhm.
based, if they're concealing information in the pregame discussion, if they're being a little seedy in in the pregame discussion, like you can
Mhm.
tell how a game is going to go from the pregame discussion. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And, it's okay to say no. Whether that's
Yeah.
you being like, "Hey, I don't wanna play in this pod because you're playing, like, Snacks Pieces," or you're playing, you know, a commander, whatever, or maybe you're playing, like, illegal cards that makes me feel uncomfortable. It's okay to also be like, "You know what? I hear what you're saying, that's fine. I can swap decks, I can swap pieces, I can put in 2 other lands." Or you can just say, "Okay," and find a new pod, which is also okay to do.
I mean, there's more to it than just like not wanting to play against stacks, not wanting to play against like hard combo and stuff like that, or like not wanting to play against silver border decks. Some people just want a normal, honest game of Commander, straightforward,
Mhm.
straight no chaser, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And just like, yeah, like this is my super wacko like ladies looking left deck. I'm just like, I was kind of looking for like a more normal kind of game. Is that cool with you?
Mhm.
That's another thing too. It's like your ladies looking left deck like might actually fit that mold. It's just maybe you just didn't describe it in a way to make it
Yeah.
seem like it was what they were looking for. Like you mentioned with your Cedrus deck, like your Cedrus
Mhm.
deck, it's a good deck. It's just not the Cedrus deck that they expected.
Yes, exactly.
Just because you're not unearthing Ulamog or whoever doesn't mean that you're not
Mhm.
doing absolutely ridiculous stuff. Like
Yeah. Or even with, like, my secret lair deck. Like, I say I have a
that
secret
that
lair
deck
deck
is
that doesn't give m
actually insane.
it is, but people will if I just say, "Oh, it's a deck made with all secret lairs," and the commander is to say, if I just leave it at that, you know that doesn't really give that much information, and people might not know what's going on, and they might just think it's just kind of a hodgepodge of whatever I felt like. But I actually, even though the card pool is limited, I was very meticulous in choosing my cards, which also comes down to, like, my concept of deck building too. Smokestacks is a piece that recently became available to me as a secret layer printing, but I choose to not run it in Sisay because that for me really goes against what I want to do as a Magic player, and it makes me feel like, and I think we've talked about this in the past too. I don't play what makes I don't play what makes me sad if it happens to me. Like, I don't play counter spells.
Yeah, I want to play. I want to play a deck that I would like playing against.
That's it, thank you. That is a smart way to put that.
I'm gonna be running interaction. I'm running a whole bunch of wraths. I'm running goat effects.
Mhm.
I'm running
Yeah.
thalias and things like that.
Mhm.
I'll run a counter spell, or I'll run removal pieces.
Mhm.
There's a line in the sand that I draw,
Yeah.
and that intent
Mhm.
informs a lot of my decisions with my deck
Mhm.
building. Like if
Yeah.
I'm building a deck to be like a CDH deck or like be a straight no chaser like high power casual deck,
Mhm.
I'm gonna pull less punches, quote
Yeah.
unquote, with my deck building. When you have like all 20,000 legal magic cards available minus like 52 cards or
Mhm.
however big the ban list is at this point, and I think it's 52, 53 cards.
Yeah.
You have access to all of those cards. It's on you to not play them.
Mhm.
You have the ability to play all of them. So
Yeah. It's just I like to build with my opponent in mind, and
yeah,
I feel like when people hear that, they go, "Oh, so I can only play hyper casual," and that's not what I'm saying. If you're playing in,
you
like,
very
you
much
wouldn't.
do not play like I think hyper casual is even just like a mindset. It's not a way of deck building either.
Yeah.
Because you can play CEDH hyper casually.
Yeah, but, like, for instance, if I went to a pod and they were like, "We're playing CDH," I definitely wouldn't bring, my Chandra deck
No.
'cause, like, that
You'd
is
play
not
Get
me
Rog.
playing with the pod in mind, you know?
Yeah.
That's completely different. I would be like, "Okay, I'm gonna play my CDH Get Raw," 'cause I have one. It's not to say, you can only build a certain way, 'cause that's not at all what we're going for here. It's, kind of approach the pod with, like, the thing in mind, like,
Yeah.
if you're playing a if you're playing, in a, like, a lower power pod and you have a higher power deck, you can play it down, or you can
So
if you're playing in, like, a higher power pod, you can play it up.
Some decks can
Yeah.
get played down. Some decks can't.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing like Boros aggro, where you have one gear and it's go. If you pull
Mhm.
punches, your deck is functionally not working.
Yeah.
Like so maybe you don't play that one. But if
Mhm.
you're playing Sisay Secret Layers, like maybe you don't immediately go tutor for Gisela Blade of Gold Knight and Saskia the Unyielding to deal 56 damage out of nowhere to someone at the
It was
table.
amazing. It was amazing, and, it was getting late.
You don't go grab Giselle Blade of Gold Knight and Saskia. You go grab like
I would get, like, Kira, Great Glass Spinner to
yeah,
protect my
the
stuff,
the
or, like,
the
a Mystical
chicken,
Conda.
the blue chicken.
Yeah. Blue chicken, a little rotisserie baby embryo floating up in
Yeah,
the sky.
yeah. Like there's
I
a
would put it
big
down.
difference between grabbing Karuk and Kira versus
Mhm.
Gisela and Sasuke. And both plays are still good. They're
Yeah.
completely reasonable, valid ways of playing, but the intent
Mhm.
is more fitting to a vibe that you can play to. And like eventually you can go grab the Gisela and the Saskia.
Mhm.
You don't do it turn 5. You do it like turn 7, turn 8. Like there's
Mhm.
a big difference between the timing of the different things that you do. And that's
Mhm.
something that I'm like always conscious of at a table. It's am I being that guy right
Mhm.
now? 'Cause I don't like being that guy. There's sometimes where like you can't help it. Like if you have a lurking predators at a table and
Mhm.
like
It
everyone's
just triggers. Yeah.
just all the time, like bang, bang, bang,
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
constantly. You can't help it.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I
like
mean
you were the one who did play that card.
Yeah, I mean, I've had moments where, and none of us are innocent of, like, these
No,
experiences, and
everyone
it's
does
all
it at
for
some point.
learning.
Yeah.
It's a learning curve, but, like, I had a deck, I took it apart because every time I played it, it was strong and it was good, but it wasn't vibing with what I wanted from a game and what I wanted to experience in a game, and I had a moment on stream where I was, like, looping something, and I'm like, "I don't feel like a good person right now." And that's just because that was my perspective and my feeling about it, and I just felt like I wasn't honoring that conversation we had in the pod at the
Mhm.
beginning. Because, like, if you have that conversation where you're gonna go low powered and you play low powered, cool, and high powered if you go high powered, cool. But if wires are crossed there, it can be a really bad feeling as a person who's doing the thing and as a person who's experiencing the thing. And I felt really bad. I was like, I'm
And
looping
like it's hard to
garbage.
know in the moment too. Like
Mhm.
usually it's after the fact, which is why I think like having a post-game discussion is a lot more important than a pre-game discussion at times.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like asking yourself,
Kinda unpacking things.
yeah, hey, this is what we aimed for. Did we hit the mark?
Mhm.
If we didn't, why didn't we?
'Cause, I mean, each game is so unique and different. A single deck can play differently 6, 7, 8, 9, 10
Yeah.
times. And, it could be an off night, it could be something that you just discovered about your deck, or maybe you just didn't realize the situation of the power level or the interaction, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing to make these mistakes. It's important to, like, learn and, go in with, like, etiquette and courtesy in mind.
If I had a nickel, I have a lot of nickels.
So many of
If I
them.
had a lot of
Nicole
if
Kidman?
I had if I had a nickel for every time I've heard my Texan never done this before, I would be
Mhm.
weirdly rich because I think I used to hear that a lot when I started
I
playing
used to say
Commander.
that a lot.
This is not me being snarky, uh, but I fully believe you put those cards in your deck for a reason. You knew that this is something that could happen. There are very rare instances where I didn't know that this could happen.
Mhm.
It obviously happens. Sometimes it's genuine, but I feel like a lot of times it is said with malcontent. Uh,
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. I've had experiences like that quite frequently where I didn't know things did that way, or
Hmm.
it didn't happen to me pretty frequently too. It especially happened in a deck where the inner workings are very intricate. So like my MEL the Blessed deck, I had a lot of flicker shenanigans that I didn't realize were working in the way that they were. And there were some infinite combos where I just didn't understand. Like I knew the pieces were there, but I thought they functioned with two other things. And like I wouldn't say that. I always like to go in expecting positive intent. I think there's a difference where, and I've had games where I've had opponents say, well, I have to do this because, like I have to. There's a difference between like doing something and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't know it did this. This is the first time this has ever happened,
Hmm.
versus like, oh, well, I'm doing this because I have to. There's no half.
Are you doing it for science, or are you doing it because you know what you're doing and you're like, I don't know, to circle back to what we were saying, have you known this all along and you're withholding information to make sure that a combo resolves or something like that?
Mhm. There's always instances where these kind of situations lead to very feels bad moments,
Yeah.
but I
Oh,
always have to
they
remember.
never don't.
Yeah, but like, like that's the whole concept of this is like, learning from situations like this
Hmm.
so that you can either change the way that you interact in a pod, or that you can, protect yourself in other pods in the future and protect your experience. Because that's the whole point. That's the whole beauty and the privilege I think we have as commander players, is that we have the opportunity and the privilege to choose our meta, to choose our
Yeah.
playgroup, to choose our pod, and that could be going down to your LGS or playing with your friends at your house. But like, we have choice here.
Yeah, like we talked about, I think it was last time, like last episode, with your Sisei deck, because I'm gonna
Mhm.
use this as an example because it's a good example.
Thank you. I hope.
You were realizing that your deck was getting off to really hot starts because of Elspeth.
Yes, yes.
Um, and we had this conversation of, like, this is just doing too much too quick.
Mhm.
And you brought up the idea of, um, is Gisela the problem because Elspeth is enabling me to get Gisela earlier than I normally would? And I
Mhm.
said, no, Elspeth is the problem. Elspeth's the
Yeah.
enabler. The payoff's usually fine. The payoff's usually not a problem.
Mhm.
But how you get there is a big part of the intent of a deck. And
Mhm.
intent is everything with
Mhm.
deck building. Um, if you want, like, you clearly want to use Gisela. Like, Gisela is one of the best win conditions for your deck.
Yes, she
Um,
is.
and frankly, without her, you really don't have much else going on
Maybe a
at the
chroma if
top
I'm
end.
lucky.
And there's a
Maybe.
big difference between Gisela and Akroma, and
Yes.
Gisela just works better with your deck. So it's
Mhm.
hard to cut that. So
Mhm.
I said, Chase, like, it's not cutting Gisela, which you wanted to do. Like, you were very hard set on wanting to cut Gisela from your deck. I was like, no,
Mhm.
cut cut Elspeth and see what happens. And lo and behold, like, every game that you've played since you've made that
Mhm.
cut, I feel like the deck has just felt much different in a better way.
Yeah. It has, and that was something I struggled with because, like, running Elspeth was objectively the best decision in terms of like what makes the deck "quote unquote" good, because you can tutor for her out very very early and then ramp up past Sisei's natural stop at a 7 to get Gisela. And that felt very good, because you like it's the most streamlined way to do it. But at the same thing, it was just so streamlined that I felt like the deck was playing the same way over and over and over and over again. And it wasn't fun anymore for me. So I took it out. And it also wasn't really fun for everybody to lose really early with a Gisela on like turn 5.
This idea of, like, oh, my deck never does that, or, oh, my, like, that happened a lot quicker than I expected. It usually boils down to, like, the amount of resources that you have, like whether you've, like, just ramped a ton, where,
Mhm.
you do the turn one land Soul Ring Arcane Signet,
Mhm.
and then have a follow up behind that, like, and then you have the Asper Sentinel or something like that. Like, when
Mhm.
you say, like, oh, my deck has never done that before, or like, my deck doesn't do this, no, it does. It's just never happened. There's a big difference between saying my deck's never done this versus, or my deck doesn't do this versus this has never happened before. Because
Mhm.
when you say this has never happened before, you recognize that it is a possibility that it could happen. It's not very
Mhm.
likely because that's like, that's a perfect 5 card hand.
I suppose I can see what you're saying from that. Yeah, when you use an opening hand example.
There's a big difference between the two. I would rather hear this is, I've never seen this happen before versus
Mhm.
this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because this isn't supposed to happen boils down to my intent was for this to not happen. And the only way to fix that would be to cut some of those cards. And like, are you
Yeah.
going to cut Soul Ring and Arcane Signet from your deck? Are you going to cut? Are you going to cut stuff like that? Probably not.
I think it's a personal thing for you to do those
Yeah.
things. Like objectively again, going back to the Sisse example, objectively the deck is better with Elspeth in there to fast track
Yeah.
myself to Sisse. But I chose to downgrade because it felt right and natural for me in my enjoyment, not only my enjoyment, but my opponent's enjoyment as well. And even then with tonight, on my stream, I was able to get Gisela out, in the midst of combat through a
Yeah. You
berserk.
you did instant speed.
I did, and it was very fun and very cool. But I don't know if I ever want to do that again because it made me feel kind of,
You didn't expect it to be as extreme as it was.
I
You
did
just thought it was
not.
gonna be cool.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And there are moments too, I think, where we do plays because we're so excited about them. We're like, oh, this is the cool play, this is a big play. And it is a cool and a big play. But
Yeah.
then, in the aftermath, you're like, oh, I did something.
Yeah. Like when
That
you
might.
take that half an hour Bolas Citadel turn,
Mhm.
and like you eventually do win, but
Or
you made
that
your opponent,
1,000-year storm turn.
yeah, or a
Yeah.
1,000 year
Yeah.
storm, like
Yeah.
anything like that. Like if you like, if it's non-determinate and
Yeah.
you're make your opponents sit there for half an hour, for every minute of time that you spend on your turn, that's 3 minutes of time that your opponents aren't playing their turn. Think about it
Mhm.
that way. That's a big etiquette thing for me. Like I I have ADHD and short attention span. Like I can't sit in a game that's more than like 75, 80 minutes. I tail off
Mhm.
mentally. Like I play snappy, I play fast because I would hope that my opponents are cognizant of my time and, me and my, mental state trailing off and, disengaging at times. Like
Mhm.
it's I'm not saying like you need to speed through all your turns. Like take your time if you need to take your time, but like
Mhm.
understand like I'm going to move quickly wherever and whenever possible. So if I'm slowing down, understand it's because I need to.
Yeah.
I'm in the tank or like I have
I
to
was just about
do
to say.
I have
Just
to
about
do
to say, yeah.
something manually. Like there is no way to
Mhm.
shortcut this. Like I'm the
Yeah.
shortcut king. You know
Yeah.
this firsthand. Like I will shortcut wherever possible just to keep things
Mhm.
moving. Um,
Letting people know that, like, "Hey, this turn might take a little bit because I need to do some thinking,"
yeah,
is also really good, and also, like, fast tracking stuff too. Like, there have been times where, like, I'll, like, do a fetch, I'll fetch when I have Sisay out. I'm using a lot of Sisay's example tonight, but, like, I'll do a fetch when I have Sisay out, and that fetch, when it gets onto the battlefield, shock it in I would shock in the card and then activate Sisay, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna get a Hallowed Fountain and I needed to activate Sisay. Do you mind if I just go ahead and get the thing I was gonna get with Sisay while I'm in here?" Stuff
yeah.
like that. I also think it's really nice in games of Commander, and I really appreciate when people do that because, like,
Shuffling
the
once
play was
versus
gonna
shuffling
happen.
twice.
Yeah, the play
It's
was gonna
huge.
happen that way regardless. It's just, the little time difference, I think, is also a super good
But
thing. I appreciate
at
it.
the same time, though, like if say you're playing a blue control deck and like you want to see each action and each piece on the stack piecemeal, you have every right to say like, no, like I actually think like, can we actually slow this down? Can we
Yes.
actually like take our time and like work through this
Yeah, don't
and
rush
like
through it.
be cognizant of these points of interaction
Mhm.
because this is important for my deck. Like
Mhm.
understanding when it's okay to shortcut versus it's not okay to shortcut
Yeah.
is a huge thing that I'm trying to be more conscious of as I play more, very high power and like fringe CEDH and stuff like that. Like I'm
Mhm.
I'm very much the person who's like, hey, I'm gonna Yisan and I'm gonna Sese and I'm gonna fetch at the same time.
Yeah.
And like those are three very big deals. Like
Mhm.
you should very much be doing all three of those separately.
I think this also ties into the concept of like not rushing through a play. And for
Yeah.
me, like people will be like, okay, I play my commander pass. And they're like, oh, actually, I would like to respond. And you're like, well, I passed though. It's like, well, no,
No.
there's steps within the turn that do allow for people to respond to things. And like,
And
yeah, it
you
may
have to
suck that your commander might get countered, but like I mean,
that's
like they
part of the
have the
game.
ability to do it. Yeah, that's part of the game. You're supposed to let that happen, even though it
Yeah.
might not be fun for you or it might not work for your plan. And like I've had games where I played with people where they go, it was like turn 4 or something, turn 4 or 5. Like we were like midway through the game, and they were like, okay, I tap my lands, I play this, I win. And then they started to grab up their cards, and I'm like, can you please tell me how you won? 'Cause
Because
you just
you
said
did
that you
like
won,
you
and
did
then
like
you packed up your
six
stuff.
different things that I can respond to each, and I can
I
respond to
was like,
each of them.
yes, and I was like, "What is happening?" He was just like, "Okay, I'm done," and he starts giving up, and I'm like, "What?" I was so confused. But, like, not rushing through plays is a very
Yeah.
big important thing. Allow people to respond to things, and allow questions too. Like, 'cause,
hmm
maybe they might wanna respond, but they might not have the ability to or something. Answering questions about your plays is helpful.
Even like at in higher power situations, where there are stacks pieces like Grand Abolisher and Morel that are becoming more prevalent. Let's say like your opponents can't activate abilities, play spells, do things on your turn. No, they actually
Mhm,
still can. Like there's onboard effects that get around that. And there's
mhm,
Adawara and Beseju, like all the channel lands from Kamigawa. Though
mhm,
like those are still fair game, stuff like this. So you still have to like say like, I'm going to attempt to do this. Does anybody have any responses? Because there are still
mhm,
responses, even though you might have your bases covered with a stacks
mhm.
piece or a hate bear.
You
There are
never
still
know.
things. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you
So
never know.
being conscious that just because you think you have it doesn't mean that you do, or just because
Yeah,
you think something is okay doesn't mean that it's actually okay. Like the age
yeah.
old saying of it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. No, in Magic, I think it's a lot more important to ask
To
for
ask
permission
permission.
than forgiveness. Because when like you should be asking for forgiveness if
Yeah.
you don't match a vibe or something like that. I think that's incredibly important. But in the
Mhm.
moment, permission and consent is the most important thing. Pregame permission and consent to play a certain card or play a certain deck,
Yeah.
like that's everything. That's the basis upon which we're playing in the first place.
Mhm.
You know,
And I'm really glad that you brought up like the concept of permission because like there's been some instances in games because like again the format we're playing is a very casual loosey goosey one in terms of like things. Again, your rules are going to change upon your play group and your interactions, but like something that I've noticed particularly amongst it's not even amongst like people who like stream Magic, but it's just like everybody even at the LGS level I've noticed where like you're like, "Oh, can I tap this land instead of this land after the fact that you have cast a spell?" Like, "Can I, tap this land instead of this?" Or, "Oh, I forgot to play a land on my turn," and it's, like, someone else's turn. You're like, "Oh my god, can I play this land?" And it wouldn't have changed the play. But, like, it's better to be like, "Hey, can I do this?" than just, like, doing it. And I think that,
yeah.
there's a level of etiquette of also allowing someone to do that as well, because, you want your opponents to be able to play the game, and you don't want them to feel like, they can't do that.
I'm never the type of person who's gonna tell somebody no, but
Agreed.
I'm also the type of player who's gonna hold myself accountable.
Yeah, I commit to my mistakes. If I
Yeah.
misplay, I'm like,
It like
I'm
it
good.
like
I'm
if it
good."
is actually a detrimental mistake, I will
Yes.
usually not walk it back
Yes, I agree. I agree.
so that I can learn a lesson. And like that's not something that like you necessarily have to do. It's something that I do that has helped me become a better player
Yeah.
and so a player who takes their time and I think through my plays on my opponent's turns and sometimes I might like missequence something and is it technically better for me to like play the card draw engine that triggers off
Mhm.
of creatures entering the battlefield before I play the creature? Yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like that's kind of a big deal.
I have an example of it too. I have an example from my stream tonight too. We keep on going with Sisay examples, it's crazy, but
You
tonight I
play a
was
lot of
playing Sisay.
you've played this deck a lot
I
recently
love it,
because
it's
the
fun.
novelty of it is like very fresh to a lot of people.
It is, I love it, but, I was playing it tonight. I We had just gone through a board wipe, so the board was completely clear, no creatures. I, had a commander sphere out. I tapped a land, and then I tapped the commander sphere for, mana, and I played a Bloom Tender. All right. Then I sacrificed the commander sphere to draw a card. And I needed that commander sphere because I needed an extra white pip. And the card I drew had 3 white pips in it. I only had 2 lands on the battlefield that tapped for white. And I was so desperate to be like, oh, can I please tap my other land and not sacrifice the commander sphere for blah, 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 because I had the card in my hand and I drew into a land that was going to get me another white. But I had already played a land for turn. And I was like, oh my God, I really wish that I could play this card in my hand, which was a chroma. And I could have been like, "Oh, can I take that back?" But no, I didn't because
The
I needed the
video
mana.
editor and the graphic designer in me is just like Command Z or Control Z only goes back one step.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back 3 things. So I didn't
Yeah,
even ask because I was like, "This is my fault. I should have
taking a deep
sacrificed the
breath.
thing
Yeah,
before I played the Bloom Tender because playing the Bloom Tender is what was the mistake. And I should have drawn the card first and floated the mana instead of playing the Bloom Tender and then floating it.
to be fair,
And
that Bloom
that was a
Tender did
mistake.
end up being relevant for you because
It
you did end
did,
up
but
needing the mana, but at the
I
time
did, but
you didn't know. You didn't know.
I I could have had a chroma out 1 turn earlier,
Yeah.
but because I was really impulsive, I didn't do that. But I didn't walk it back because that felt like a very game-ending move to me, and I wanted to commit to my mistake on that. And, I'm not saying, "Oh, if you do this, you have to commit to mistakes." No, it's your game, it's your pot, you do what you do. But,
I think
for me, there's a difference between
especially as an opponent, if I know someone is like that's a brand new deck, like they are
Mhm.
learning, like they're just starting to try and learn the deck.
Yes.
I'm going to be
Yes to this.
very, very lenient with
I
take
agree.
backsies, walk
Mhm.
backsies. Hey, let's
Mhm.
go back like a spell or two stepsies. Like I'm
Mhm.
here for that. Like I want you to get the best experience out of your deck. And
Yeah.
if that's to my detriment, I'm one of those people who my fun and my enjoyment out of Commander is more derived from the group experience rather than my own experience. Like
Yes.
my experience is one part of the group experience. And if I know that someone's playing like a brand new deck and they this is the first time they've sleeved it up, or like they're a new player, like just learning how to play the game, or like, this is their first commander game ever, I'm gonna set them up. Like I'm gonna make sure that they have the best time. I'm
Mhm.
I'm not gonna throw them bones and like just slow play my deck, or like just
Yeah.
not play cards whatsoever. But like if my opponent's playing Zindersplit and Okun and I have an Najila out with Wooburg, I'm giving them that second combat step.
Yeah, because
Is
it's
it gonna
fun.
kill
It's
me? Hell
fun.
yeah, it is. But I want them to experience that. Like I want them to
Yeah.
feel that power, because that's the
Mhm.
kind of experience that's going to
Exciting.
make it's exciting. That's the type of experience that's going to make a commander player for life.
You mean, is it the type of experience that's gonna make people laugh, cry, and care? Because we need
Absolutely.
all of us.
Like
Mhm.
one extra combat step for a brand new player is going to like just make their day, like completely change the game for them.
Mhm.
I'm going to look at the other two players at the table, because it's a group decision. I'm going to look at them and it's like,
Mhm.
are you guys okay if I do this? This seems really cool. I
Mhm.
want to see what happens. Unless everyone says yes, I'm not going to do it.
Mhm.
But more often than not, with the types of people that we tend to play with on stream or at
Mhm.
events and everything like that, our friends are gonna be super here for it. And I looked
Yeah.
over at Tappy because I was playing with Tappy at the Energy, and when this came out. I was like, Tappy, I want to do this. She's like, why haven't you done it already? I want to see what happens. This looks so cool.
Yeah.
And guy drew like 40 cards, had like a 900 Okun. This is his first
Mhm.
commander game ever. Like
Yeah.
hadn't touched magic cards in like 4 months. and like just went to the event on a whim and got borrowed a deck by a TO.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure he went out on eBay the next day and like bought the deck. Like he
Yeah.
looked like he had that much fun, or the TO saw the look on his face, just like, you know what,
Mhm.
you can have it. Like
Yeah.
it was the Secret Lair coin flip deck.
Yeah, and I played that deck, and it is bonkers fun.
It's so
It's
cool. Like it
very
is
good.
if I was a new player like playing that deck for the first time, I think like that would be an awesome deck
Yeah, and it
to
is,
get
and
into the
it's
format.
exciting.
Exactly. And like I want
It
to facilitate those exciting moments. You
Yeah.
know, I can for every game that I like let someone else go off, I'm gonna get the opportunity to go off because
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer of you have to give action to get action. That's a
Mhm.
idea in poker. People aren't gonna want to play those like big gnarly hands with you if you never play with them when they want those big gnarly hands. And it's
Mhm.
going to loosen things up. It's going to, people are going to feel more comfortable. People are going to feel more open. Like they're going to want to do things. They're going to want to create those memorable moments. Whereas
Yeah.
like if you play tight, if you play uptight, a lot of interaction, everything like it's like counter this, counter that. Oh, hey, you're trying to do a thing. Nope, I'm going to fatal push your commander so you can't do anything anymore. Like
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for all of that. Like there is a time to do the play like that. There's a time to to play tight, but recognizing when it's just playing loose, doing crazy BS with your friends and
Mhm.
letting it fly, letting it happen. Like you don't have to play that board wipe. That's a big thing with me. I know you've like
Yeah.
slowly adopted this idea too. It's like just because you have it doesn't mean you should play it. If the game's like 70, 80 minutes in,
Mhm.
we're not playing that Wrath of God.
Yeah, I had a game on stream recently
Game's
where
got to end.
yeah, the game's got to end, and like my opponent, uh the correct and optimal play was for her to play a board wipe, which she did. And then we were like, well, we're probably going to be here for another like 2 hours if the board wipe resolves. And she was like, oh yeah, that's true. We got to get in a game too. So she took it back. And like, like that's something you don't have to do. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, you don't have to do, but it was really appreciated because we were able to get another good game in, and that was really fun and really great. And at the end of the day, like winning is fun, but the win doesn't really matter
yeah.
in this instance because I'm not playing for a prize.
If you didn't enjoy yourself the next 2 hours trying to get that win, was
Yeah,
it really even enjoyable and worth it? Probably not. No.
yeah,
Just let it
and
happen, let the game run its course, and just
mhm.
shuffle up and go again.
Yeah, and
It's
I
perfectly okay to do that.
it is, like again, I keep going back to like that's like the really good thing about Commander is that we get to choose the kind of experience that we
Mhm.
get, and I really can't
Our
emphasize that enough,
our
really.
social contract is a lot more loose than
Mhm.
say modern or legacy, where
Yeah, I would
rule
agree.
number 1 is this is a game I'm trying to win. At the same time, Commander is a game someone does need to win.
Yes, of course.
Um, don't just sit there and twiddle your thumbs for 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
Um,
because
there are
like,
people
it's
who like that, and I recognize that. Like that is
yeah,
it is like Mario Party meets Monopoly for them. Like that's their
mhm,
thing. More
yeah,
power to them. It's just not my thing.
yeah, and, again, like the whole thing is just like be conscientious of conscientious of the people that you're playing with. Your opponents value their time because I've been in games where I got knocked out like relatively early or maybe even like midway through the game. The game goes on another 2 hours and I'm just sitting there doing nothing. And I've done that
Yeah.
to people to myself. Again, I'm not innocent of that. It sucks and I feel so bad and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sorry I did that to you.
At
You
the
know?
time, you thought you were progressing the game by eliminating a player.
Yeah, and it turns out I did not do that.
In kind of wrapping things up, it like in in that particular instance, I'll usually say like, "Hey, it's objectively correct for me to eliminate you right now,
Mhm.
but I don't see the game ending anytime soon.
Agreed.
Should I still eliminate you?" I think
Mhm.
that's a reasonable question to ask.
Yeah.
Like we've mentioned it multiple times, like in summation. Etiquette basically boils down to just having good intent and good listening and being
Yeah.
understanding in a situation that might make someone feel uncomfortable or a situation that they would rather avoid to begin with, and just being
Mhm.
conscious of the fact that those situations do exist.
Mhm. Because we come to this place for magic.
Yeah.
Come to this
And
place.
when in doubt, like, you can always just ask yourself what would Nicole Kidman do, and chances are
Yeah.
that's gonna give you a good answer.
Honestly, every time I am faced with something where I'm like, I don't know what to do, I pull up pictures of Nicole Kidman after her divorce from Tom Cruise was finalized, and I'm like, do that. Yeah.
Call it a day.
I've said it a couple times this stream, but I was like, Nicole Kidman, Weaver of Tales. I want to make a legendary creature named Nicole Kidman, Weaver of Tales.
I
Songstress
mean,
of
there
music, of
sounds like
movies.
that's a Chulane alter sleeve waiting to happen.
Nicole Kidman
Because
is she
Chulane's suffix is teller of tales.
Teller of Tales? Oh, that's
But
true.
there's also Timna the Weaver.
There is the Weaver, um, or Yisan the Bard. Well, no, she doesn't sing. Well, she sang in
No,
Moulin Rouge.
Moulin Rouge is the exception to the rule.
Moulin Rouge is amazing.
Yeah,
I cry every
that's
time.
fantastic.
Yeah. Because heartbreak feels good in a place like this. Anyways.
Yeah, you're gonna be
Thank you.
heartbroken in a game of Commander.
Yeah,
So just make sure that it feels good.
yeah, because
You have the ability to make sure that it does. So exercise
she literally says, "We come to this place for magic." Right there in the
it.
AMC
Magic.
theaters.
Parentheses the gathering.
Yeah, it's in a very if you go to the theaters, look at the subtitles, it's very small, but it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, the gathering is silent.
Yeah, always
Yeah.
ask yourself, WW NKD.
NKD. WW.
NKD, baby. What would
I'm
Nicole
I'm
Kidman do?
I'm gonna get that tattooed on my forehead.
Okay, don't do that. I don't like
Okay.
that.
Tramp stamp.
Nope. Nope. Maybe sleeves or a sticker for yourself. Put it on
Okay.
your deck box. Feel good about it. Remind yourself every day. Thank you so much for listening to Bad at Magic. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chase, also known as Mana Curves. I'm a Commander content creator. You can find me everywhere at Mana Curves, streaming Commander content, and I also write articles for Star City Games under my real name, Chase.
And I'm at EK Place Cards on all of things. I work behind the scenes with all of your favorite content creators like Chief and Bot and Olivia and Ailey of Elder Dragon Hijinks. You can find this podcast on YouTube and all of your favorite podcast catchers of choice. You made it this far in the episode, so it's not too much to ask for you to hit the subscribe button and the like button, leave a comment, review, all that kind of stuff, because it actually does help out and helps us defeat the evil algorithm overlords.
It's what Nicole Kidman would do.
Yeah, Nicole Kidman would leave a
Yeah.
review and a comment, so you should do that.